All right, this is the first day presentation of section 8.6, identifying special quadrilaterals. So identifying and classifying information is like super important. It's a lifelong skill. Being able to look at something in front of you and figure out what's going on is like super, super important. And I guess it's especially important in healthcare. Let's say you're not feeling well and maybe you've got a headache and an upset stomach and you go to see your doctor and you talk to your doctor about what's wrong with you. Your doctor is going to do some tests and talk with you and then make a determination of what is the best course of action to heal you. And the more information that can be provided to your doctor, the better chance you're going to have of recovering and getting well. So it's used a lot in healthcare, and it's used a lot even in relationships between people. You know, being able to read body language in addition to regular language can help you make sure that you're doing the best that you can with the relationships of the people that you're with. I do promise today that any of the work that we do with quadrilaterals will not have any diseases or ailments of any kind. So what's the type of problem I might expect you to be able to do? So here we go. Quadrilateral ABCD has one pair of opposite angles congruent. So what quadrilateral could that be? So it has one pair of opposite angles congruent, not two. So that would rule out parallelogram because that's the definition of parallelogram, is having two pairs of opposite angles congruent. That's one of the 5 ways we can prove it's a parallelogram. So that's a no. Rhombus is a special parallelogram, so that's a no. Rectangle, all of the angles are congruent, and again, a special parallelogram, so that's a no. And a square, again, all angles are congruent, special parallelogram, so that's a no. Isosceles trapezoid and trapezoid do not have opposite angles congruent. The isosceles trapezoid has base angles congruent, but not opposite angles congruent, and trapezoid doesn't have any of that. So that leaves only the kite. The kite is the only figure that has one pair of opposite angles that are congruent. So that's kind of the work or type of stuff that I'm going to expect you to be able to do in this section. So now it's time for the Mr. Kenyon Quadrilateral Chart of Fun. Yes, it is a ton of fun. At least it is in class. I'm sorry it's not going to be quite as fun here sitting in my dining room. Then being in class would make it a lot more fun. But we're going to go over characteristics of quadrilaterals and show you what's important and help you be able to tell the difference between them. So here's the quadrilateral chart of fun. You'll notice going down the chart are properties of quadrilaterals. So both pairs of opposite sides parallel, exactly one pair of opposite sides parallel. Diagonals are perpendicular. Diagonals are congruent. That's a tricky one. Diagonals bisect each other. Both pairs of opposite sides congruent. One pair of opposite sides congruent. Both pairs of opposite angles congruent. One pair of opposite angles congruent. And all angles are congruent. And then our quadrilaterals that we have are parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, square, kite, trapezoid, and isosceles trapezoid. So we're just going to go through the chart of fun and talk about the characteristics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go across. So I'll start with the characteristic and just go across and handle each one of these figures individually. So first up, both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. So that's the actual definition for parallelogram. So that's going to be a yes. And then any special parallelogram is also going to follow through with that. So rectangle, rhombus, and square are also going to be yes. Kite does not have both pairs of opposite sides parallel, so that's a no. And neither does trapezoid or isosceles trapezoid. So that takes care of the first characteristic. Next one, exactly one pair of opposite sides parallel. Well, anything that's a yes is going to automatically be a no. So rectangle, rhombus, square, and parallelogram are all going to be a no. Kite does not have exactly one pair of opposite sides parallel, so that one's a no. But trapezoid and isosceles trapezoid do, and those are called your bases. So these two are yeses. Diagonals are perpendicular. On a parallelogram, by definition, diagonals are not perpendicular. In a rectangle, they're definitely not as well. Rhombus is one of those special ones. Rhombus ones actually have perpendicular diagonals. In square, that one of those wonderful squares that does practically everything, that one's a yes. Kite, that was a characteristic that we talked about in our last section, so that one's a yes. Trapezoid it does not have perpendicular diagonals, and neither does isosceles trapezoid. All right, diagonals are congruent. Tricky one. You want to say yes for parallelogram, but actually the answer for that one is a no. Rectangle does have congruent diagonals. Rhombus is definitely a no. Square is a yes. Kite, the diagonals are definitely not congruent. On a trapezoid, they are definitely not congruent. But an isosceles trapezoid, that's one of the special characteristics of it, is that the diagonals are actually congruent to each other. Diagonals bisect each other is a characteristic and one of the 5 ways you can prove it's a parallelogram. So a parallelogram and any special type of parallelogram are all going to be yes. On a kite, only one diagonal does the bisecting. That's the one connecting the vertex angles. So this one's a no. And on a trapezoid and isosceles trapezoid, those are both no as well. All right, both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. That's again one of the 5 ways we can prove a parallelogram. So parallelogram is going to be yes, and any special one is going to be yes as well. Kite does not have opposite sides congruent, so that one is a no, and it's both pairs. So trapezoid, that's definitely a no, and so is isosceles trapezoid. Now exactly one pair of opposite sides are congruent, so anything that's yes is automatically a no. So we can make that super easy. Now, does a kite have exactly one pair of opposite sides congruent? No, it doesn't. So that one's a big no. Trapezoid is a no. Not exactly one pair of opposite sides congruent. But isosceles trapezoid, those legs are actually congruent to each other. So that one is a yes. And then let's move now to both pairs of opposite angles congruent. Now that's one way that we can prove that we have a parallelogram is both pairs of opposite angles congruent. So parallelogram and any one of the special ones, rectangle, rhombus, and square, are all going to be yes. And then kite. Both pairs of opposite angles congruent on a kite, that's a no. And then trapezoid and isosceles trapezoid are no's as well. Moving on to exactly one pair of opposite angles that are congruent. So exactly one pair of opposite angles congruent on a parallelogram. Anything that's yes is going to be an automatic no, because that's taken up there. Exactly one pair of opposite angles congruent on a kite. Yeah, that would be the non-vertex angles. So that one is good to go there. And then on the trapezoid and the isosceles trapezoid, those are no's. Now all angles are congruent. On a parallelogram, not all angles are congruent. But on a rectangle, they're all 90 degrees and congruent. On a rhombus, that's a definite no. On a square, yeah, all of the angles are congruent on a square. Kite, nope. And neither of the 2 trapezoids, the regular and isosceles. So there you go, the quadrilateral chart of fun. Yeah, maybe not quite as fun as it would have been in class, but we did get through it, and you've got those characteristics. So assignment, what I want you to do on Tuesday is just do questions 1 through 11, and you will be all set. So thank you for watching this presentation.